welcome to the Beyond the Deal podcast. Welcome, John Bernatovicz, my guest to Beyond the Deal podcast.
Sure thing, Jill. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and hopefully connect more with you. Obviously, at the same time, maybe one of your listeners. That's my aspiration, hopefully, to make a positive influence in someone's life and redirect it in a way that's to their benefit and where they want to get accomplished. But I'm a man of faith. I strongly am a son of God and try my best every single day to be that. I'm not always the best at it and recognize that. I am married to my wife, Emily, and I have two kids, 18 and 16-year-old to-bes. I'm saying that now because we've got two drivers in our house beyond my wife and I, which is a big moment in our family. Son's a really cool kid into construction and landscaping, and my she's a tennis player and super great in her academics, high will and Mao. And at the same time, I am very adamant about trying to transform how people feel at work. I think that there's a global epidemic, and it's not COVID, of people not enjoying work and not getting the most out of their time, the countless numbers of tens of thousands of hours that they spend working. And I see that human resource professionals and business leaders have the greatest chance to change the momentum of that. That's my work. In my main business, Willory, I also have a water vending company, which, again, great diversification, a HR and payroll staffing consulting firm, and a water vending business, very, very diverse. And I started off my career working in sales, working for ADP, and then got into executive search, and then have been full-time entrepreneur for the last 15 years, which has been a really wonderful blessing. And as you mentioned, Jill, I do have a passion for golf. That is when I have free time, I'm either rooting for a Cleveland sports team or I'm playing in a golf event, whether that's individual practice or an ideal situation playing in a tournament. And that's a little bit more about me.
Yeah, great. So one of the conversations that we had, I mean, obviously the diversity in the companies that you own and that history as far as how you even transitioned from some of those companies. We also talked about just, in the hiring of salespeople that I do at the different companies that I support, and your background with ADP. I love people that come from that background because there's a solid skill set that is always learned from those type of companies when I interview different people. But we got into a discussion, as far as, you have different talks that you do, right now, as far as, do you want to talk a little bit about the different talks that you have? Because I thought those were interesting, and there was one specifically that, that thread that I pulled on that was really interesting to me. But I want to give you a chance to kind of talk through a couple that I know you have that are, you're passionate about.
Yeah, I'm on the HR Like a Boss speaking tour right now. I'm actually in the throes of it as we're recording this podcast. I am home for the moment, but I'm traveling quite a bit over the next 2 months, sharing the story of HR Like a Boss, which is a book that I published back in October of 2023 and became my publisher's first ever #1 new release. Blessed that the publisher was Sherm Books, which is the largest HR association in the world, and excited to have the momentum around the ideas of HR Like a Boss, which at the cornerstone of that, which aligns to your audience, is ownership, that HR professionals take ownership of their job, that they love what they do and the people that they serve, that they have a strategic mindset around how to operate their function as well as supporting the business. And then there's some personal and professional characteristics that I see exceptional HR professionals have, like emotional intelligence and leading leadership teams and providing coaching to managers and always being present, great communicators, great relationship builders. And those are all sometimes, for those of you that are listening, they're non-HR professionals. You say, those don't sound like the HR professionals that I know. They're not great at building relationships. They're not great at communicating. They're maybe more behind the scenes. They're not strategic. They're more compliance managers or hires and firers. Well, the idea is to transform the HR function to be more strategic business leaders that just so happen to practice in the field of human resources. That's what that talk is about, and super blessed to have momentum about it. I will tell you, writing a book makes other people think you're way smarter than you actually are. And the book has been a great conduit into securing new book deals, new speaking engagements, as well as new book deals. Working on a couple of those right now. And then I also do another talk about HR as a bottom line business and looking at the three levers and primary priorities that human resource professionals, I hope when they take a strategic view, are looking at, which are the lives of their employees, the bottom lines of their business, and the neighborhoods of their communities. I think HR, when done right, can transform all those things in a positive way. And we take a really business lens view of how to do that from an HR perspective and giving them more of that business acumen expertise. And then lastly, what I think the thread you pulled, and you mentioned it earlier on in the intro, is that I am writing a manuscript called Purpose is Paramount. I have done that keynote a couple of times, and that's a very intentionally deep-rooted feeling story, which is really about how to encourage people to find clarity of their purpose as it changes throughout the course of your life, and making sure that your purpose serves as your true north when it comes to making key decisions about where you spend your time, who you spend it with, what you do with your time. And as you probably can attest, and many of your listeners, your purpose changes over the course of your life, whether getting married, starting a family, buying a house, starting a business, and then at some point you achieve financial success, and then is that it? And then what's next after that? And that book and manuscript is really meant to hopefully create clarity around purpose. And there is a tie back to the employer, because I am very much focused on that side of my work. And it's really about how do we connect people to the purpose of your business. That'll be an element of the book as well. Those are the three main talks that I do, but heavy HR like a boss at this moment, Jill.
Yeah, and I, from an HR perspective, the companies that I work with are typically, the small, medium-sized businesses where many of them use fractional resources. So they're using a fractional CFO. They're using a fractional VP of sales. Many times they don't have an HR person, right? They might have a controller that is playing that HR resource, right? And so a lot of times I see that where they're lacking that HR resource. And to your point, that's a big resource. They're really just trying to check the box. Are we trying, or are we, just not getting ourselves into trouble, right? To your point, where they're missing the opportunity of, are we enabling and providing our team just opportunities within our company and providing them a culture where they can thrive and grow and, just really just help our company to be a culture where they want to be a part of, and, will tell all of their friends, oh my gosh, you want to belong here. You want to be here. Right. And even for those small organizations, right? So I don't know, maybe the HR like a boss in organizations that you deal with are in that medium-sized to large-sized companies, where they definitely have a team of HR people.
I'll share this with you just as feedback that I've received from people that have read my book, is that this is not a textbook on human resources. I've had a lot of friends of mine that thankfully bought my book and read it and would call me and say, John, I got to tell you, that was not what I expected in the sense of the content inside of the book. It's really business focused on how can employers better leverage human capital to drive results for their organization, increase shareholder value, grow and develop innovations. And at the forefront of that, in my opinion, is the human resource function. To your point, Jill, and what I mentioned earlier, there's a stigma about HR to the point where Toby from The Office is the most popular HR character in the last 30 years. And you're laughing because did he really add any value to the Scranton branch of Dunder Mifflin? No, he was just he was just a doormat to Michael Scott, the person in charge, and was
Right.
always his anti person, as you would describe it. And the most effective human resource professionals that I know and work with are a sounding board to CEOs and shareholders and executives. They help them navigate through very unique situations. And I tell people this all the time. If you have an issue in your business, it has to do with a person. If you have a department that is excelling, it has to do with a person. And whenever
Right.
you find yourself in that situation, it has to do with an individual. And if you're not considering the human resource aspect of your business in that sense, whether you have 10 employees or 10,000, I think you're missing the mark significantly. And that's what the book's concepts are all about. I am not a technical HR expert in the sense of the compliance components of developing a handbook or
Yeah.
other portions of benefits or whatever the case might be. I do have domain expertise in recruiting and payroll and whatnot, but the idea of HR Like a Boss is helping human resource professionals and business leaders increase their business acumen around how can I best leverage the people that I have, and at the same time, how can I give them opportunities so that we can change their lives, help them get something out of work that means something to them. And if we do those things well, we're probably going to drive results for the bottom line of our company. And then you're going to be able to do something great within your community, because a lot of these well-run businesses that I see that have cultures of employees that want to work there and they're making money in the process, well, they need to do something with that money, and typically are run by organizations that want to give back to the community, whether it's attacking a societal issue like homelessness or education or
Right.
whatever other topic is
Food banks
meaningful for
or
you
right.
in your backyard. That's where I see the most successful businesses, in my opinion, that are for profit. And I'll end with this statement on this. Where I learned that, and the random deduction through interviews that I did and just talking with people, is I studied really successful entrepreneurs and looked at what they were doing at the tail end of their careers. And I'll use Warren Buffett and Bill Gates as the two best examples. They've spent the last decade of their time getting rid of the massive
Right.
amounts of wealth that they've accumulated, because they reached a point that says, well, is this it? And I think to myself, how much more successful could have Warren Buffett been and Bill Gates if they had had a purposeful commitment when they started Berkshire Hathaway and they started Microsoft, that wasn't about getting Microsoft in every single computer in the world, as opposed to Bill Gates spending all of his time about eradicating particular diseases. I know that's a key part of his life. And what taught me that was, having spoken with employers of all kinds, what I found was the only organizations that had a clearly defined purpose were nonprofits. And they built a business around an idea of serving the community. Now what I'm trying to do is inspire for-profit organizations to learn from our nonprofit partners to say, you are a for-profit business. You're there to make money for your shareholders. That is critically important. You're there to create a culture and an employer of choice for your people so that they can feel good about the job that they're doing at their employer. But when you do those things well, what are you doing with those big piles of money and those happy employees? How about if we attack a societal issue that exists right in your backyard? The one that I like to use the most, because it's the most popular, is Bombas socks, where you buy knitted cotton socks for $29 because you believe in their mission of ending homelessness and or supporting those in need. And as a
Right.
result, you get a bunch of customers that believe in the company, you get employees that believe in the company, the vendors are all believing, because this purpose has something that tugs on your heart. And all this
Right.
comes back to a conversation I had with my nephew. Shout out to Tyler Bernatovicz. I'll make sure to send you the link to listen. One day a few years ago, he was talking about getting into the workforce, and he said something to me that changed my life. Thank you, Tyler, for that. He said, Uncle John, I just don't want to find a job being an engineer for a company that makes a widget. I want to work for a company that makes a widget while making a difference in the world in a better way. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, there's something that the world needs to hear. And
Yeah.
as a result, really focused on purpose as paramount, having a
Yeah.
societal responsibility within your organization, And I think doing good will never be discredited by anyone. And there's definitely a scientific way about doing that, and we're going to articulate that in the manuscript, Purpose is Paramount.
Yeah, and I think that that's where, when we were talking about HR like a boss, and that led, that's what I was thinking was, it just made me think about that purpose, right? Because I have a lot of companies that I've worked with over the years that have used the EOS system, and I know we talked about that, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and many times it starts with, right, that mission, vision. They have you start at the very top level, right? And many entrepreneurial systems have you start there, right? And even if you're a second generation or third generation business, you've had that handed down to you, but you still, and you're just chugging along, and you're okay. Maybe you're a second generation and you just don't want that business to fail, right? That's your mission, right? And you have 200 people that are supporting their family, and you don't want that to fail because those 200 people are putting food on the table. But at the end of the day, it's really, to me, it's going back to that purpose, right? What is the purpose more than that, right? What is, if you are a steel manufacturer, if you are whatever it is, an IT business, if you are whatever that business is, right? You've got to work with the leadership team to dial it back to say, what is that purpose, so that then you can communicate that to the rest of the organization to give them, because I really do think that next generation, that generation that is now entering that workforce, to your point with your nephew, I have children entering the workforce that are saying the same thing. I don't want to just work for a company to do that job. It needs to mean something. Otherwise, why? Right? They will go and work for that other company for less money if it means something to them, right?
I think that generation has learned a lot from, I'm not going to date you, I'll date myself in the sense that we were really motivated by 401k valuations and creating a nest egg and being able to retire at a certain age. And sometimes we may sacrifice relationships or experiences, where I see
Right.
the Gen Zers really, frankly, prioritizing themselves and their well-being and other things. And as a result of that, you get this generational divide that can happen, talking about one in some form or fashion. Right. I'm a Gen Xer, and I know that the baby boomers were talking down on the Gen Xers, just like the Gen Xers are probably talking down in some way to the Gen Zers. But I'll make one really important clarification, Jill, to this point of purpose.
Yeah.
You mentioned mission, vision, values. I've studied EOS. I've talked with a bunch of integrators that use it. We've also looked at other scaling up tools, Scale Up, and a bunch of other platforms. And where the distinction is for purpose is above your mission. Mission is a tactical, we're going to do this. We're going to be the best at this. And a purpose is meant to be your organization's aspirational why.
Right.
Why do you
And that's
exist
why I
as an
wanted to
employer?
have this conversation. That's exactly right. I wanted to have this conversation because I think that many times companies start there instead of starting above. What's the aspiration? What's the true why, right?
Yes. And I'll share this with you.
Right.
And here's the point. This is the opportunity market environment that I think makes the most sense. Jill and I have people in our lives that are going to be the new employees. They're the new generation in the workforce, and they're telling their parents and someone that'll listen is, I want something more out of work than a paycheck or a 401k. Fair enough. That's different than Gen Zers. Different than Gen Xers, different than baby boomers. That's totally cool, and I accept it, and I think they're frankly right. What's then also happening is that we have employers who have spent a lot of time working, thanks to the integrators of EOS or good business schools that are focused on defining your mission, vision, values, documenting them clearly. All that stuff is great. But there's a layer above that I mentioned earlier around having a purpose. I'll use the phrase again. It's your organization's aspirational why. It's something that you will never achieve as an employer. I'll use an example. We're going to eradicate homelessness. Now, again, I would love that to be something that actually happened, but in the spirit of that actually happened, this has been an age-old problem for many communities. I'll go one step further. There was a study done that suggested 4 out of 5 employees are looking for some sort of meaning in the work that they do other than just the job responsibilities. Back to our point of the new generations. They want something to hold on to inside of their business. But only 23% of the Fortune 500 have a purpose statement. Let's just start with they have a purpose statement. And those purpose statements on average, because I read every single one of them and I documented, the average length of those purpose statements are 13 and a half words. I don't know, maybe you can remember your favorite lyric from a Taylor Swift song or Neil Diamond, depending upon your era. You might remember that 13-word lyric, but you're not going to remember a company's 13-word purpose statement. My point is this: get into a room with your key executives, get groups of employees from all elements of your business, an intern, a 2-year staff accountant, someone that's in a management role, an executive leader, and just ask them the question, why does this business exist?
Right.
And then use tools like Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini through that and try to leverage AI tools or your own thought process to think tank, what is the definition of our purpose? And then synthesize it down to something simple that's 4 words or less. That's my suggestion. We at my firm, Willory, our purpose is we empower people. And as a result of that, what we've done to take that even one step further, we've got a clear purpose, it aligns to our mission, our vision, and values, is that we've aligned our purpose to attack a societal issue that exists within our community, which is providing career opportunities for disadvantaged youths in parts of our Northeast Ohio that maybe could use a little bit of support in that regard. As a result, we donate money to an organization named YOU that does that exact work. And we're also doing a lot of work in HR Like a Boss about getting students that are just graduating with a degree in human resources. We're helping them get their SHRM certification because it helps them get a higher paycheck. It gives them better credentials. It provides more confidence to those individuals, and they'll have, quite frankly, a more advanced career path than someone without that credential.
Yeah.
I don't mean to pat myself on the back. That's
No,
not why
yeah.
I'm saying that. I'm just suggesting
Right.
I can't sit here and say those words out loud and then not do them in my own business. And that's why we've been very,
Yeah.
very meaningful and intentional about clarity of our purpose and what the outcome we're trying to achieve and what group of people are we trying to support from a nonprofit organization that are going to help us attack that societal issue.
I think there's been a few companies that I've not worked with directly, but I have partnered with, right, over the years that I think there's a tax code, right, where you're not a for-profit, you give part of your earnings to nonprofits. You're not technically a nonprofit, right? A 503, whatever, right? So I'm not a tax accountant, but I used to be an accountant, technically. However, what I will say is there was always this thought process in my head of, really, right? Is that really, or is it just that they're just trying to, right, game the system, right? Are they just trying to be different, right? So I think that there's also a communication of, no, this is really who we are, right? This is why maybe it's an internal communication of when you're hiring people as far as this is who we are, this is why we're different. And if you want to be a part of our team, right, this is why we exist, right? How do you go about hiring? And is that something that you communicate externally? So it's kind of a 2-part question.
Yeah, the idea behind the purpose is Paramount. It's to create greater clarity for those nonprofit organizations who started a business around an idea that was attacking a societal issue. And then as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that resonating with the community, they had to build a business around the nonprofit idea. That's typically
Yeah,
what I see happen. There's
right.
someone who starts something out of their basement or in their garage, and the next thing they know, that garage isn't big enough. They need a warehouse. That warehouse isn't big enough. They need partners, and all of a sudden, they have to hire a CEO and a CFO and all these elements. Whereas in for-profit companies, they're typically, and I don't mean to be discrediting or talking poorly of our audience. I should watch my words. I'll be very careful on that. But I'm an entrepreneur myself, and when I first
Right.
started out my business, I was very money hungry. I was very
Right.
dedicated
Right.
on
I mean, you're for
building a
profit. Yeah.
building a business so that I could buy a house and have a car and support my family, and was very money motivated. And I also realized that I probably wasn't a great employee inside a corporate organization because I didn't want to be confined to the limitations of that business. I wanted to be able to be entrepreneurial, creative, innovative. And I, as a result of that, became an entrepreneur. And the thought process of this idea of a purpose statement, if we can clearly define it, and then we can create, in the easiest case is then to create a partner, a nonprofit partner that purpose aligns to, and you can
Okay.
then not, as you mentioned, kind of skate the system to say, oh, I started this business, now I have a nonprofit with the same name, and people might perceive it as being nefarious or not with the best
Yeah.
interest.
Right.
But you can
Right.
align it to the American Red Cross or Habitat
Mm-hmm.
for Humanity, or in our case, Youth Opportunities Unlimited or SHRM Foundation or other places that we give back to. And
Right.
that segregation of duty makes it feel like you're not doing it in the means of trying to Jones the system. I do
Right.
know this. The part about what I describe as being the most challenging aspect is that sometimes doing good is best done with no one knowing it.
Right.
A lot of these purpose statements and suggestions that I make are intended to let the world know that your company, Acme Inc., not only is a great culture with people that are aligned to it, it's a well-run business, but they're doing something in your backyard that's making the world better. And it
Mm-hmm.
would attract shareholders, it would attract investors, it would attract customers to say, I have a choice to do business with either Acme Inc. or XYZ business, and I'm going to pick Acme Inc. because I can see the impact that they're having in our community. That's the infinite
Right.
logic of it. And the people that are working there are your customers too, and they feel good about doing the work that they're doing because they can tie their job responsibility to every time I do my job well, I know that we're going to make an investment of those profits into this charitable organization, and I feel good when I do that.
So you're not hiring or choosing customers or clients based on this purpose, right? Specifically, it just is an outcome of it, right? Because an employee who joins, if that's not aligned with their values, they're not going to be comfortable.
And that's the whole idea, is that
And it's somewhat of a Nordstrom's type of situation where they will weed themselves out.
that is very true. You can get people that it doesn't mean that they're all the same, that
Right.
there's just some
Right.
fundamental core value inside of it that allows them to create that unique relationship, not only with the employer, but with
Mm-hmm.
other employees that have a similar interest. It's you and I in 10 minutes realized that we had a passion and love for golf. And quite
Right.
frankly, we probably would be rather spending the last 25 minutes talking about golf than we would
Right.
about these business challenges, which is okay.
Yeah.
But
Right.
and you and I are very different people. I'm a male, you're a female, you live in Pittsburgh, I live in Cleveland. Our upbringings are different, but we have this common bond. And as a result, my guess is we're probably going to play a round of golf at some point. And that commonality will give us a chance to create experiences and relationships with one another. And I don't know if you've studied this, but I do quite religiously. There's an organization called Gallup that puts out a Gallup 12 engagement survey that measures 12 elements of organizations that have high engagement, which to me means your people care about their job. They're engaged in what they do. And the number one lowest rated question that they have is, do you have a best friend at work? And I think ultimately one of the coolest ways to improve employee engagement is to get people the chance to create relationships at work. And when you do, then, oh, by the way, you might develop a best friend. And then, oh, by the way, the company's doing well. And you can both go to the Habitat for Humanity event that your business is sponsoring, and you can go build a house. And when you're done, go have a cup of coffee or a beer or dinner. And the next thing you know, you realize you have a common interest in golf, and your kids are in the same school, and so on and so forth. And the next day you go to work. I look forward to hanging out with Jill because we have this in common, even though I never even knew her before because she was in sales and I was in HR. That's generally and I don't know if I was too long and winded with that, but that's my logical downstream effect of creating a clearly defined purpose and getting people inside of your business that attach to it.
No, I thought this subject was extremely important for my listeners because I think it goes above that mission, vision, values, and I appreciate the conversation today. And John, I think that people can, you also have a podcast. They can see that at, where is that? HR Like a Boss, right?
Yeah, HR Like a Boss. We're on Spotify and Apple and all the other typical podcasting platforms. And check us out. We'll have our 200th episode here probably in about 3 months, which we're super excited about. That is a major accomplishment. And I love the chance to be on your side of thing, ask all the tough questions, and then be quiet and let my guests be the stars of the show. But I do also appreciate the chance to have the challenge. It creates empathy for me when I'm a podcast host to understand the trials and tribulations and some of the angst and anxiety and pressure it is to be a good guest on your podcast. So hopefully, Jill, I did that okay.
Well, yes. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
My pleasure. I hope to see you soon and out on the links.
All right. Yes.